With the summer sizzle starting to fizzle, cooler heads are looking to lock in a wellness routine fit for the fall and beyond. Lucky for you, Ritual's high standards don't drop with the temperature. Fully committed to traceable science and sourcing, Ritual is shaking up the supplement industry with high-quality ingredients and scientifically developed formulas. With them, you know what you're taking, where it comes from, and why it's important. They've got every base covered, from their clinically backed women's 18-plus multivitamin to groundbreaking options like stress relief and sleep melatonin, which both use first-of-its-kind bioseries technology designed to optimize formula delivery. And right now, for a limited time, get up to 40% off your first month at ritual.com/podcast.
Well, hello, everyone. Whoa, it looks like really close to my face right now. Okay. Sorry. Give me 1 second. I just gotta adjust my camera. I'm like really close to the face. Ha! And hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. We have been doing this show for a while now. So if you are just getting here, what took you so long? We've been doing this for a while now, but you're here. That is what is important. So let me tell you what this show is about. This show is about real talk about education, employment, mental health, physical health, family, anything else that is steamy. So we like to have those conversations and put it all out in the open. You know, those private conversations that you just talk about with your friends, or you complain about with your coworkers, or you only talk to your supervisor about, or it's so hush hush that people don't really talk about it. We like to do that. You know, this is a platform where we put it all out in the open for your education. So, today today is no different, and I just want you to know I look like I just woke up, so I apologize for that. But today is no different, so let's get right to it. So today's topic is, I need to make a slight revision to this banner, but today's topic is living with a living with a disability, part 11. So you are not confused. It is part 11. There is a parts 1 through 10. So I encourage you to, wherever you are watching this episode right now, to check out our video library and look at our previous episodes and check out parts 1 through 10. But yes, I can't believe it either that we actually reached part 11. This is crazy. So this is the 11th time that we have discussed this topic, living with a disability. So yes, we like to repeat topics here at Hot Topics because we believe that there is multiple ways to see a single topic, and there's multiple experiences, multiple points of view, multiple lenses, and we want to put as much out there as possible. So I don't know what happened, but this topic is apparently the hot topic at the moment, and today is no different. So I have a guest with me who is going to sit on the hot seat. She's going to take the fire, and she's going to go through it. I'm going to put her through the ringer. And let me tell you who she is. So her name is Sarah Stelmach-Brown. I hope I'm saying her name right. And I am going to tell you who she is. So, who is Sarah Stelmach-Brown? I apologize again to my guest if I'm saying her name wrong. So Sarah Stelmach-Brown is a caregiving advocate with a major focus on autism and Alzheimer's disease, and the host of the podcast Caregiver Chronicles, which we will discuss later on. She is the mother of 2 boys on the autism spectrum. Sarah worked as a certified nursing assistant and certified medication technician at assisted living facilities, nursing homes, and in-home care before leaving in July of 2021 after experiencing caregiver burnout. She is raw and passionate as she speaks about her experiences as a caregiver in both personal and professional settings. Sarah is unafraid to tackle serious topics, but also uses her wit to bring levity to almost any situation. She uses her podcast to help caregivers from all walks of life connect to others and get their messages out about making the world a better place for those we care for and those who care for us. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, let's do it. I can't wait, and let's get her on camera. Let's get her to the stage right now. Hi, Sarah. How you doing
Hello.
today? How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you? Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, awesome. So, of course, the topic is living with a disability, and you are going to talk about that disability, and I'm going to have you, tell your life story and say whatever you want to say. So I'm looking forward to grilling you on that. So without further ado, I'm going to just hand over the baton and let you tell your story.
Thank you. So my name is Sarah Stelmach-Brown. I'm a mom of 2 boys on the autism spectrum. Both my kids also have been diagnosed with ADHD, and I have another child who is diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder and anxiety. I have ADHD myself. I was diagnosed at the age of 7. At the time I was diagnosed, my father was also diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. So I have the experience of having a parent with ADHD, having ADHD myself, and having 2 children with autism and ADHD. And we all have very different neurodivergent brains. So living with a disability for me, or I don't really like to call it a disability per se, because I don't think it limits me in every aspect of my life, just some. My house is never clean enough. And that's, where you can tell that, hey, this woman has ADHD. But I have to I have so many layers to it as it's kind of my personality in my life, and it's always just there in my face every day.
All right, so let's unpeel those layers, if you don't mind.
Okay. So my diagnosis was, like I said, at the age of 7. I couldn't, one characteristic of ADHD is starting a task and not being able to finish it. I would get bored very easily, or I would get distracted. One thing I could not do, and I remember being a little kid and just not liking myself for this. I knew as a kid something was wrong with me because I couldn't color a page. Every other kid in my class could sit there and color a whole page, and halfway through it's like, I can't do this. I just can't do this. I thought I hated coloring. I kind of hit a point where my mom's like, what do you mean you hate coloring? Every kid likes coloring. It wasn't so much that I hated coloring. It was just a characteristic of my ADHD and something that came out in my personality. A lot of the things that I did as a child that drove my mother specifically nuts were also things that my father did. So while she was learning and reading up on ADHD, and again, this is back in the 90s, she was seeing things in my dad, and she would say like, hey, our daughter does this and you tend to do the same thing. My dad eventually went and got diagnosed with ADHD as well. And then, my sons with their autism diagnosis, a lot of times there's overlaps with neurological disorders, and ADHD is just a neurodivergence. It's an inherited neurological disorder. There is no cure for it. And there's treatments, there's medications that can help, but there's no like cure for it. You don't grow out of it. You always have it. And same thing with my kids being on the spectrum and also having ADHD, because neurological disorders can actually coexist. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people believe it's one or the other. And another neurological inherited disorder that I have is anxiety. And anxiety oftentimes coexists with ADHD. Usually I don't think I know anybody with ADHD who doesn't have anxiety that as an adult. And my mom pointed out things that I used to do as a child that drove her nuts. Like I would get so thirsty, like I would just cry, like I want something to drink. And she thought I was just nuts. And I realized as an adult that, hey, wait a minute, that was me being afraid to ask you for something, which was ridiculous on my part because my mom would always give me something if I needed it. But, it was just a layer of a misdiagnosis of anxiety because I just had ADHD.
So, well, let's unpeel the anxiety. So when you say anxiety, you talk about being afraid to ask for things. What else were the signs that you had anxiety?
Oh gosh. Pretty much everything. I was afraid of teachers. I was afraid of other kids. Like I would try to get along with other kids and teachers, but sometimes I just, anxiety is anxiety. You just feel anxious. I would get very nervous before tests, sometimes so nervous that I would do terrible on them. And eventually, growing up, I had an IEP, and eventually they were able to sit down with me and realize that I did so bad on written exams because of anxiety, as part of the ADHD, as they do coexist in many people's brains. That they would have to sit down, they'd pull me aside and they'd ask me questions. Hey, what does this mean? Or, oh, Sarah, come here for a minute. I just got to ask you something. And they'd ask me, and I could always revert back the information verbally, but never in written form or never in test form, because it would stress me out. If I knew it was an oral test, couldn't do it. If they just said, hey, I just want to talk to you, what do you think? And then I would always pass verbally. So it was there. The information was there. It just getting it out of me was a different thing. That was test anxiety. Super common. Neurodivergent people have test anxiety non-neurodivergent people have test anxiety as well. Public speaking, even though I have a podcast, like I've had to overcome that independently. Just the fear of not being enough, all that with anxiety.
And you got that from your father. So when he had his anxiety, how did he handle it?
My dad really didn't recognize or share that he had anxiety till more recently. And when I was a kid in the 90s, it was weird because I wasn't diagnosed with anxiety till I was an adult. It's looking back as an adult realizing, holy crap, I had anxiety too. A lot of times when I would express that I felt anxious about things or stressed out about things at a young age, it was, you're a kid, you don't have anything to worry about. Everything you need is provided for you. You can worry when you're older. And so there was a lot of that mentality. And I even remember being in my 20s and having like a panic attack at work one day where I had to go out 911 because my blood pressure was so high I couldn't breathe and I was having chest pains. And my dad looked at me and he's like, well, if you keep having these drama queen fits, it's going to impact your work. And I'm like, well, I didn't do that on purpose, Dad. Like my heart was pounding. I was shaking. I couldn't breathe. And it wasn't until he started having panic attacks himself and anxiety himself that it was funny because he told me about some of things, like they just bought an RV and he was like, I am so nervous to drive this. He's like, I am like afraid. He's like, my heart is pounding. Like, he's like, I've never drove anything that big before. And I'm like, Dad, it's going to be okay. Deep breaths. You can do this. And I'm like talking him down through his anxiety, Granted, again, this was recently as adults, but I think he looks at it differently now as a sense of he's had, panic attacks and like claustrophobia incidences in the camper they used to have, that he realizes like, hey, wait a minute, you have no control over your anxiety. It can control you if you don't take a minute, take a breath, and talk yourself down. And that's kind of something I had to learn to do on my own as a kid because I had no diagnosis or medication for the anxiety. The ADHD I had medication for a little while as a child, but not after a certain point I stopped taking it. But going through that on my own, it really, I don't know, it just really changed how I view anxiety and how I view neurodivergence and what I know I'm capable of. It put me in a level where I feel like I'm just capable of doing a lot more with all of it. Like I'm capable of overcoming obstacles a lot more easily than I think I am, if that makes sense.
Well, tell me more about that.
So an example would be honestly starting a podcast. I was petrified to do this at first. I was afraid to talk about my life. I was even told like, you shouldn't share stories of your children and their struggles. You shouldn't share stories of your struggles. Nobody needs to know that. It's embarrassing. It's inappropriate. It can make you look bad. And I still have a little bit of that in the back of my head. Am I always doing the right thing? Am I always saying the right thing? And some of that again is like our natural like fight or flight, like am I enough? But some of that is my own just me really wanting to overcome those feelings. And so, I did the things that I thought I couldn't do, and I'm still doing them. It's not easy. Sometimes I'm sweating and shaking thinking about, what am I doing? What am I saying? I'm making myself look nutso, or, I'm not good enough to do blank. And realistically, I have to pull myself back and talk myself down. But again, this is the only reason I can is because of years of coping strategies. One of my coping strategies just happens to be humor and having a little bit of a self-deprecating humor, unfortunately, where sometimes I will be the first person to make fun of myself before anybody else has the opportunity. It's just a way to, I don't know. I can't really explain it. It doesn't make sense. And it actually used to bother some of my younger coworkers. My older coworkers knew what I was doing. They knew it was a coping strategy for stress management and anxiety. My younger coworkers would be like, why are you so mean to yourself? And it's just, things that, I don't know. I can't explain it. Just everyday things that I do that I push myself to do.
And, the fact that you have a podcast, it looks like you have several of them. It's you're doing something that you never thought you would do. You're doing something that, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, you would think, you would never do something like that. You would never, well, I don't know if you're on camera, but you would never, put yourself out there. You would never try to talk to people. You would never try to initiate conversations. You're doing something that, and I'm just guessing here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like now you would never do things that you never thought you would have done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. You kind of hit the nail on the head with that. 10 years ago, I never thought that I'd publicly be speaking about how much just about my anxiety, my ADHD, my children's struggles, my struggles. I don't think I ever would have I wouldn't even share with my coworkers that coloring a page was hard for me. The time I opened up about that was when a coworker was telling me about her son with ADHD. And I was like, oh, I have ADHD. She didn't even believe me. She's like, how can you have ADHD? And I'm like, I talk too much. I'm like, I make fun of myself constantly. I have no self-esteem. I'm like, I have ADHD. And I went over other things, like I have to use coping mechanisms. Like, I was, as a medication aide, I had to write certain things, with medications, like reminders if somebody got an inhaler, eye drops, a cream or whatever. I would have to write on the med cup, and I would have to color code it so I could look at the med cup quickly and know blue is for eye drops, green is for inhaler, red is for cream. This color means I have to get a blood pressure when I administer these medications. So, and they'd be like, you're so focused and organized. And it was really not so much that I was focused and organized. It was that I had to be to get the job done. And then one thing, and that's like the same thing with my podcast, I have to be organized to get the job done. And that organization for that one thing takes all of my energy. And it's something that people don't always realize, is that with ADHD and anxiety, the amount of organization it takes to do the things you absolutely have to do to survive, it's exhausting. It takes a whole day to mentally prepare myself to get in that space.
That's interesting that you brought up the exhaustion. So that leads me to ask, do you find yourself physically tired a lot?
Yes, all the time. And not just from having to mask and trying to act normal. And I use normal in air quotes because I don't, like, 1 in 4 people have, some type of mental illness or neurodivergence. So what is normal? But having to mask it is really, it's exhausting. And I find myself physically exhausted. And to add a layer to that exhaustion, I'm a mom with a home. I have to keep my home somewhat clean, at least to a safe point. I have 2 kids. I have one child who's nonverbal on the autism spectrum, who requires a lot of physical care. I have another child who is verbal, high functioning, but his anxiety is to a point where he requires a lot of social and emotional support. And there's just so many layers to it. But yeah, I would find, like I said, I would find the exhaustion a whole day. I couldn't do too many things before work, because then at work, I wouldn't have the energy to focus, or vice versa. At home, if I worked mornings, which I rarely ever did, afternoon is my best time of day. And so now, with the podcast, I'm able to schedule my life around what I need to do for my kiddos. But that just, I don't know, like, I can't explain the exhaustion with masking. And it's not even so much a physical tired. It's like a mental tired. It's like my brain is tired. I just need to rest. Things that would wear me out would be, obviously work. Grocery shopping is another thing that I just find so overwhelming and stressful. I used to try to go grocery shopping before work. And then one day I realized that I can't do both in one day. I go to the grocery store and I come home from the grocery store and I'm just like, I was around too many people. I had to put myself in a position where I had to focus on what was on my list, not get distracted by shiny objects or cookies, because I like cookies, or chips, but not get myself distracted, focus on my list, focus on what I was going to do. And while all these other things are happening, and even that can sometimes be stressful for me. That being said, I still get up and do it. I don't use my ADHD as an excuse to not do things. I use it as something that I know I have to prepare my day around. So this is how I'm going to do it.
That's interesting that even going to the grocery store is a chore for you. So are you one of those people that has to do like one thing at a time that is difficult to multitask?
Well, that actually depends on the task itself. If I am doing something like cleaning, I actually find that I do a better job if I have an audiobook or music on in the background. and I am cleaning my kitchen and dancing around my kitchen as I'm cleaning, I feel like I get less distracted that way. I can kind of just get in a groove and get it done and not overthink the task. What overwhelms me more than doing a task on its own, or a lot of times just having a task that's a big task, like cleaning my whole kitchen. I know I have to start with the sink and then go to the stove and then do all the counters and organize the cabinets and then the tables and then the floors. And the task of cleaning your kitchen itself isn't necessarily a hard task, but there's so many subtasks that sometimes I have moments where it's like, I don't know where to start. That's what overwhelms me. So that's why I usually put on an audiobook or something like that. Or even YouTube. Like I'll be walking around my house cleaning it with like my phone in my hand, like watching a YouTube video, like focusing on the YouTube video, but actually getting things done because I know what I need to do and I can mindlessly do them if I'm focusing on something else. And it also makes the task less crappy.
Okay. But I mean, in regards to like the grocery store example that you brought up, so could you do things like go to the grocery store, complete that, and then do your podcast? Or is it like you go to the grocery store, once you get home, that's it, you can't do anything else?
Yeah, no. It's not. Well, it depends on the trip. If there have been Walmart, I'm sorry, Walmart. There have been times like self-checkouts stress me out. I don't like them at all. I really prefer a person checking me out. I know that I'm old-fashioned that way. I like smiling and saying hi. I actually do enjoy social interaction. Self-checkouts are stressful for me. I don't know why. A lot of times, if it's like a crowded grocery store on a bad day, I might take a break. I might say, you know what, I need a few minutes, maybe have a snack or drink or something, do something else for a little while and recharge. But it's not necessarily like a grocery store and then nothing else for the rest of the day. Even with podcast recordings, there have been days where I've been able to record multiple episodes in one day and do just fine. Even with work, I would take care of my kids. My youngest son required 15 hours a week of therapy. So we had ABA therapy going on while I was working on stuff for my podcast or whatever else I needed to do, or even during the pandemic when my kids were home and I was working in an assisted living facility, I was homeschooling both of my kids on their Zoom meetings, doing all the things I needed to do and going to work. Yes, it led me to burnout. I think it would lead anybody to burnout. I don't think it was just ADHD burnout either. I think it was like a caregiver burnout because I get to the point where I just couldn't take care of anybody anymore. Like I needed a minute to just take care of myself. And that's also why I'm such a big advocate for self-care. Whether you're neurodivergent or not, you need it. But it's not an all or nothing with me. I usually just need a moment to step away.
Oh, you just need a little time to yourself, a little break.
Yes. And, neurodivergent or not, we all, like every single person does. Nobody can do everything all the time. I haven't met Superwoman yet. I've met some people who are pretty close, but I haven't met the real life Superwoman yet. When I do, I will share her with the world. But
so with all that happened with COVID and the pandemic, do you find that, which is understandably common, do you find that your anxiety has gotten worse, particularly around being around other people?
So there was a point where it was bad, but again, I was experiencing burnout. I was experiencing caregiver burnout mostly. And that definitely exacerbated it. When I resigned from my job and, when I resigned from my job and I had my job for 10 years. So the thing about people with ADHD who can't hold down a job, that's a myth. That's not true. I was at my job for 10 years. And when I resigned, my boss said to me, "This is a huge loss for us." And I looked at her and I said, "I'm sorry, but my kids need me." And, and they did. That was another layer to my leaving, where actually that was probably the main layer, was my kids needing me home. But there was also the layer of burnout, which I didn't even realize how bad my burnout was till I was out of there. Once I left and I started to prioritize self-care throughout my day, my anxiety levels have gone down significantly. So, I mean, self-care is not a cure-all for anxiety. There is no cure-all for anxiety. You can take medication to help, but you're always going to have anxiety. You can use coping mechanisms, but you're always going to have it. But yeah, I think that there was times where the pandemic definitely made it worse. One thing that was really scary for me was going back to work. Actually, after having COVID myself, having a bad case where I was in bed for 21 days and getting up and going back into work, knowing that we had lost residents and knowing that we still had positive residents in the building. I was fortunate that nobody in my house got COVID when I was sick. And I was absolutely horrified to go back in there and bring it back home.
I mean, I would imagine like that's pretty common. I mean, I don't know if you felt like, you were the only one, but that's a lot of, I don't know if I'm minimizing it, but a lot of other people did that as well.
No, I would definitely agree with that. I knew I wasn't the only coworker who was afraid to go back into the building after that. Several staff members resigned, or not several, but a few resigned or took a leave of absence when it hit because they were in nursing school doing clinicals and they were like, I can't take that risk. Or one of my colleagues, actually, she had to resign because she's like, I have a young kid and my husband works and I can't do this. It was hard. It was hard. I know I don't think I've met a single healthcare worker, and I know a lot of them who wasn't or who isn't feeling some level of burnout from the pandemic, neurodivergent or not, with anxiety or without. My husband, even he works in media, and he's even had an increase in anxiety since this pandemic. And obviously there's so many other things going on in the world, especially like, I don't really want to get too political, but there are so many other things in this world. Working in media is just as scary. It's a scary time for them too, or it definitely was in 2020. I know that there were threats made to news outlets and things like that. And, there was just, so all of that had heightened, obviously, everything. Just surviving 2020. I don't think anybody is not going to have PTSD from that year. If you survive that year unscathed, then I don't know what to say. You deserve a trophy.
Understandably so, yeah. So now, so you talked a lot about coping strategies. So one of which was humor. Well, I'm sure you have your strategies for the anxiety and those for the ADHD. So let's get into that. So in regards to the ADHD, what are your coping strategies?
So my biggest coping strategy for ADHD is trying my best to be organized. And I know, and forgiving myself, because that's only going to make my anxiety worse if I don't. And that's something that I recently learned to do, is forgive myself when I make a mistake or when I'm not as organized as I want to be. This right here, my monthly planner. This is my best friend. This is my coping strategy for ADHD. I have to write everything down, pen and paper, and I have to make sure that I have an alarm set to check this every day, because otherwise I will forget. I can't, even digital planners for me, we just don't get along. I'm more old-fashioned. I'm used to this type of planner. Like I said before, at my work, one of my coping strategies with my medications when I was doing a med pass would be, as I was prepping the meds to give it to a resident, I would have to write down if they had an inhaler. I would have to color code. Color coding folders was a big one for me in school. At home, it's more of just making lists, remembering the lists, reminding myself to remember the list. that's still 50-50. Again, forgiving myself for that. And just having some kind of background noise to take my entire focus off the task so I'm not overdoing it or underdoing it. Holding myself accountable for the tasks that I do and don't do, making a list, journaling my priorities for the day. My son's therapy, my interview, my bathroom needs to get cleaned, and these are their priorities today. And then I'll kind of put a couple other things that I would like to do, but maybe if I don't get to them, I'm not going to be mad about it.
So it's like you're being nice to yourself.
Yes, and I think everybody should. I think everybody deserves to. Because, I say on my podcast a lot, like, we're not perfect, we're parents. Well, we're not perfect, we're people. Everybody is a person, neurodivergent or not. And there's only 24 hours in a day. You need to sleep about 6 of them. And you need to eat some of them. And then other parts of the day require time for maybe your job or your family or whatever else. So you only have so much time to do the things that you want to or need to get done. And to make everything else a priority over yourself and your family isn't fair to your family or yourself.
That's true. Very true. So now let's talk about the coping strategies for the anxiety. You talked about humor. What others do you use?
So self-deprecating humor. That's my biggest one. And that's probably an ADHD coping strategy too. Another one that I've really started is meditation. And this is also a coping strategy for burnout as well. This works for, all the layers. Meditation is really hard for me with my ADHD brain because not thinking or just focusing on my breath is difficult. And one of the things that it has taught me is that if a thought comes up, acknowledge it. Don't get mad. Don't judge yourself for your thoughts. Take a deep breath and return to focusing on your breath. And so that is a strategy for both anxiety, ADHD, and burnout. And it's worked really well. Journaling is another thing that I really like to do, especially like a gratitude journal. Name 3 things that you're happy about today. Name 3 things that you're proud of. Name something that made you feel good. Finding gratitude isn't always easy, especially when you're burnt out, when you're anxious, when you're having trouble focusing. And that's just another one of my strategies for my anxiety. Another one is just calling a friend, just getting on the phone and calling a friend. A random dance party. Again, I like to have my smart speaker play a song and I will just start dancing around my house. I feel stressed. I need to shake it to some Britney or whatever else. I like that Dua Lipa song, Levitating. That's like my new favorite dance song. So, any of those strategies can be helpful for anybody in any situation. It's not just a cut and clear anxiety or burnout or depression or ADHD or whatever. It's finding what works for you as an individual.
Awesome. And on that note, we are going to wind it down. So do you have any final words that you would like to impart to our audience? Any words of wisdom you'd like to share? Maybe things that you wish you knew back then that you know now? Any advice that you'd like to share at this point?
So, 1 in 4 people are struggling with something. 1 in 4 people are struggling with either depression, anxiety, ODD, ADHD, autism, or whatever else in the world. That's the amount of people who have some kind of mental illness or disorder or disability or different ability, whatever you want to call it. You might be one of those 1 in 4. You probably live with somebody who's 1 in this 4. I will tell you 4 out of 4 people in my house have some type of neurodivergence. So, and that's just in my house. Be kind to yourself, forgive yourself, and try to remember when you're interacting with people and they have a different point of view or a different way, or they do something that you don't really understand. recognize that maybe there's more going on than what you just see. Disabilities, different abilities, neurodivergence, there's no physical characteristics for it. I look kind of normal. You know, I look kind of normal. I know, see, that's my humor. But there's no look to it. So you can't just assume a person is normal because they look normal. You can't just assume about people. Try to be kind and try to think about, maybe this person is different or disagreeing with me because they have a different outlook. Try to just be kind and respectful to others. It's not always easy to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but just try to.
And so I do want to ask this one final point. I'm not sure if you talked about the medication. Are you on any medication for anxiety, ADHD?
I am not. I have taken anxiety medications in the past, and they kind of affected my personality a little more than I wanted them to. They took away like the positive aspects of my personality, not just the anxiety. So I didn't feel comfortable on them. ADHD medication made me feel a little off as well. I didn't really like taking them. My mom didn't really like me on them either. She preferred me to be my rainbow self. And that's why I had to learn so many coping strategies. And that's why I had to learn the masking. However, I would never, ever, ever shame somebody who needs medication to take it. If you need it to get through your day, then you need it, and that's fine. I am a huge advocate for people who need medication to take them. I feel like I have gone through my whole life without them, and I've learned enough coping strategies that I function okay. My oldest son, we are actually pursuing anxiety medication for him because his anxiety is really, really in a bad place where he's having trouble with day-to-day activities. So, we're pursuing that avenue for him. So if you need meds, take them. If you don't need them and you learn coping strategies, that's wonderful too.
Okay, fabulous. Well, Miss Stelmach-Brown, thank you so much for joining me today. So let me put up your banner here. So you guys, Sarah is all over social media. She does not have a website at this time, but you could still reach out to her and learn about her services and her podcasts. You can find her on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. She has a Flow page. Well, it's just all of that and all of her podcasts. So definitely check her out. Follow her on social media, listen to her podcasts, and just learn more about her. So Sarah, can you tell us more about your business, your podcast, or whatever, or what do you do?
Nothing. No. That's not true. So I'm mostly a stay-at-home mom right now. And I do have a podcast called Caregiver Chronicles. It is a free resource for anybody who is in a caregiver position, whether you work professionally as a nurse's aide. I have episodes on burnout. I have episodes on being a CNA. Whether you're an autism parent, I have a lot of episodes on that topic because I'm an autism parent myself. I also talk a lot about Alzheimer's, dementia, and elder care because I've spent so much of my life doing that. Again, it's a free resource. It's free to listen to my podcast. You can find it on any major platform. We're on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google, Audible, Amazon. We're on multiple platforms for updated episodes. Older episodes you can find on YouTube. Podcasting has become a form of therapy for me in a sense of I'm able to share my story and just not just me have validation, but give other people validation. I always, I am a person who likes to really help people deep down in my core. That's just always been my goal, is to be there and help people and support people. And so while the physical aspect of caregiving is probably over for me, as I've experienced burnout and I'm just not ready to go back to that. And I don't see me going back to that other than caring for family. The emotional part and the support part is still very near and dear to my heart. So I really want to have a platform to connect caregivers from all aspects of caregiving, because a lot of times there's overlap too. And so that's why Caregiver Chronicles is my job. I say job because it's unpaid, but it's my thing. It's my job.
And that's fine. You know, it's your thing. And we definitely want people to support you. So you guys, the viewers watching right now, if you go to the Flow page, you will see all of her podcasts. No, it's the same podcast, but on multiple platforms.
Yes.
Okay. I apologize for that mistake. I thought it was multiple podcasts, but it's actually the same podcast on multiple platforms. So, which is no excuse for you guys. So there is multiple ways that you can listen to her podcast, the Caregiver Chronicles. So for all the CNAs and the PNAs and the nurses and the doctors and home health aides, all you caregivers out there, you know, this podcast is for you. And I encourage you to listen to her podcast. That information is on the Flow page, which is scrolling below. And for those of you watching this episode on YouTube, that information will be provided in the description. And of course, while you're at it, follow her on social media and just learn more about her podcast and all that she is about. All right, so Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
I try. All right, so I will take you off camera now. And it is just you and me, guys. So now we have reached the conclusion of our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. So wherever you are watching this episode, whatever platform, whether that is Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, eventually I'll get to Instagram, but wherever you are watching this episode, please follow us, like us, subscribe to us, whatever the button is to us, press that button, stay in touch with us, learn more about us. And who is us? We are A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. And if you would like to learn more about our company, the things that we have to offer, our services, our workshops, if you want to learn more about hot topics, if you want to learn more about me, if you yourself are looking for a tutor for your child or even for yourself, please hit us up. Our information is scrolling below right now. Wait, where's my little, do you see it? Yeah, I hope you see it. It is scrolling below at the bottom of your screen. We are all over social media, so you can contact us on social media. You can also go to our website. You can see it below, but I will just say it here. It is www.astepAheadtutoringservices.com. So go to our website. Please reach out to us. You can also reach out to us on social media. So if you want to learn more about A Step Ahead Tutoring Services, if you want to look for services, please reach out to us as well. I will make this point that I, Gabrielle, would like to know what you thought about this episode. So please leave a comment in the comment section below or in the comment thread. Let us know what you thought about this episode. And another thing I would like to add is while you're doing all of that, please subscribe to our email list and our texting list. You will receive exclusive access to our promotions, our special events, and our discounts when you sign up for these things. So definitely sign up for our email list and our texting list. That information is also scrolling below at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this information is also in our description. And of course, you can always go to our website. All of this information is there. But definitely sign up for our email list and our texting list. So I am going to share this final point before we officially close.
Hey there, have you heard of us? We're a small team of tutors here at A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. We believe that education and information should be accessible to everyone, regardless of income, race, or creed. We're dedicated to making this happen, but we need your help. Please consider making a donation to our company. No amount is too small. Your donation will allow us tutors to remain employed, offer free and low-cost services, put on productions like this web series, and reach out to families nationwide. With your help, we can tackle the academic challenges of our students and the emotional, mental, and behavioral changes that result from these challenges. As a bonus, we can improve our communities in the process. Support us today. Note: we're a for-profit company. We're not a charity. Your donation may not be tax deductible. Please consult a tax professional.
Awesome. So please consider making a donation. Your donation will be appreciated. All right, and you guys, we reached the end. I'm all over today. Sorry. We have reached the end of this episode. Thank you again for joining us. I, Gabrielle, look forward to seeing you at the next episode. So now I am signing off.